The very first principle that I instill in my patients who are struggling with lumbar spinal stenosis is flexion is your friend. We're going to utilize the flexion moment of your spine to not only reduce pressure off your nerves, but also set you up for that perfect program that's not only going to help you now, but help you manage your symptoms and then prevent things that you want to prevent in the future, such as surgery and getting worse. And so when I'm working with my clients, we're going over this principle very early because it applies to everything that we're going to do. In order to have long-term relief, we're going to be needing to talk about strengthening, stretching, nerve mobility techniques, spinal mobility techniques, and at the foundation of every bit of that is flexion. Now, there's a lot of uncertainty that goes around lumbar spinal stenosis in that you don't want to end up having surgery, but you have an MRI that shows stuff you don't want it to show, age-related symptoms and degenerative things and disc herniations and disc bulges. And those things don't necessarily feel great to hear, but they also don't feel great to feel. And so we need to manage those things appropriately over time. And when you have spinal stenosis, you've got to be utilizing flexion. So I'm going to challenge you to stop listening to what your friends are doing and start learning your body. And when you understand flexion is your friend and you understand what's going to make you feel better and you understand what could potentially make you feel worse, not only do you feel better now, but your future just looks a lot more clear. So if we can get you stronger, get you a little bit more flexible, a little bit more mobile, and then get your symptoms and body more predictable, that's a win. And that's what we're going over today is we're going over that flexion principle that I instill in every single patient of mine to not only help them feel better now, but give them the certainty and the clarity that they're looking for. We're going to be using this flexion is your friend principle not only for giving you the relief that you need now, but to help promote recovery and then help promote your resiliency. And that's exactly what I do with my clients is that we have these stages of recovery and principles that we need to be incorporated in your everyday routine, but we need to utilize flexion as the foundation of that. So that's what we're going to be going over today and every aspect of what recovery should look like when you have spinal stenosis while you are using flexion at the foundation of it. So flexion is just an anatomical motion of your spine, right? Flexion is that ability to bend forward and round out. So think about sitting, think about bending over and touching your toes or bending over to pull weeds. You may notice that you're not bending your knees as much and you're just bending over at your back to get that job done because it doesn't really bother your back because it's flexion. The opposite of that being extension. That's standing, walking, arching your back backwards, and that reduces the space in our spine and thus can be a little bit sticky or uncomfortable when you have spinal stenosis because you already have a space issue, and when you extend, you're reducing that space even more. You do also have a slight extension moment when you go to rotate. So when you go to rotate, it closes down on one side of the spine and opens up on the other side of the spine. The reason why I go over this is because once you understand it, the exercise or the stretch you're about to do becomes more predictable. And if it becomes more predictable, it's less scary. And so I can make you successful with stretching, strengthening, and mobility work, all the things that you want to do, as long as you understand the principle and the foundation of flexion is your friend, and that flexion feels good because it opens up, and how to incorporate that little bit of a flexion moment, that little bit of a relief moment with everything you do so you can be successful now and in the future. So I have the pleasure of seeing so many patients improve and get better. Improve not only in their back pain and leg pain, but their ability to stand and walk. And it's absolutely amazing to see people get better, and not only get better now, but when they were skeptical when they first started seeing me, like, hey, I've got these changes in my spine, I have stenosis, I don't want to do surgery. How am I going to get better? How am I going to stay better? Well, we utilize flexion as the principle throughout all of the recovery process, but that's only a little bit of it, right? And so when we're talking about lumbar spinal stenosis, most of us have a general idea, and the research supports this as well, is that we need to be doing some sort of strengthening, stretching, nerve mobility techniques, spinal mobility techniques, and working on our walking tolerance at the same time that we're trying to reduce our pain. And so we include flexion, that principle of flexion is your friend, throughout all of that, but we need to get a little bit nuanced. We need to have a little bit of fun with it and learn your body along the way. And so when I work with my patients and we're utilizing flexion at the foundation, they're understanding, okay, this is what I need to be doing. I need to be doing that flexion moment throughout, but how do I get that job done? And I'm going to go over that right now. But before I get there, we're going over aspects of the Spark program that I developed, right? We're working on strengthening, pain relief, activating the nerve, regaining mobility, and then keeping walking at the foundation of that. And in my book, Revision Sciatica, I go over 8 weeks of a plan with someone with spinal stenosis on how to not only do each one of those aspects, but how to progress it. But today I'm going to give you a snapshot of utilizing flexion throughout all of those to help not only make you successful, but to give you relief. And so if you're looking to level it up, check out my book. I know you may get something from it. Before we get started, let's recap for a second. For long-term relief, you need to be incorporating some sort of strengthening, nerve mobility, back mobility, walking, and pain relief measures along the way to not only make you more successful, but for you to feel better. Now we're going to apply the flexion is your friend principle to all of that. So this may be a little bit against what you've done or heard, but hopefully it can save you some time and future frustration. So the first one that we're going to be going over is strengthening. That's the first part of the Spark program, the S, strengthening. And so a lot of people, one of the example exercises that I traditionally see in the clinic is a squat. So when you have stenosis and you go into the clinic or work with a trainer, they're like, all right, let's do a squat and let's get you there. Well, the problem with the squat is that's an extension exercise, right? You go to poke your butt out, and what do they say? They say, pretend that you're sitting into a chair, and you're like, yeah, no problem, I can do that. Well, it may be a little hard at first, but it does get better. You're gonna poke your butt out, and whoop, right there. As soon as you poke that butt out, you're going into extension. Now, some people with spinal stenosis do just fine, and they may not feel much, and they just may feel work in their back, and other people are like, man, this is a little bit harder than I would expect for something that seems so easy to do. And you're like, how do I normally sit into a chair? And you're like, oh, I've been way forward and then I sit down into the chair. Well, that's because your body's telling you to use flexion. So we still want to squat in some way, shape, or form to help improve our leg strength, but how you do it matters. And then that's where this comes in. And so this is a suspension trainer. You can ask almost all of my stenosis patients if they've used this before, and they absolutely have. And what I recommend is that we typically go down really deep into that squat utilizing the flexion moment. And so this allows us to get really deep into the range of motion and then use our arms to help us. And so we're not necessarily pretending or thinking about sitting backwards. We're more thinking about going down. And that going down moment through that full range of motion allows us to be more successful, not only in the strengthening, but not cause us pain in our back and legs. And that's important because you're gonna not do the squats if they hurt, but this is a way you can do the squat that feels very good and allows you to get into a bigger range of motion, more strength, more relief. That's how it works. So this actually works you more than doing a traditional squat. And so while squatting is good, doing the traditional squat of sitting your butt back can cause symptoms, and that's a way that you avoid that. Now, I recently released a video that we went over 5 great exercises for spinal stenosis. So I'm gonna have that pop up here that goes over more strengthening. But that's just one way that we utilize flexion throughout this whole process when we're thinking about how do we strengthen and not make us worse, but help improve our spinal stenosis symptoms at the same time. So another part of the Spark program is activating the nerve, which are nerve glides and improving nerve health. Let's go over how we utilize that flexion principle to improve nerve health. Before we get to nerve health, you may have noticed that I'm a little bit out of order here. I went into strengthening first, and then I went right into activating your nerve. But we can't forget the P. The P is the pain relief. And so in my book, I go over a plethora of pain relieving things that you can be doing, such as a TENS unit, sleeping positions. What about shockwave or PRP or ice versus heat when you're talking about sciatica and stenosis? I go over all of those in the book. But in general, most of my clients find 1 or 2 things that give them the pain relief that they're looking for. I recently had a patient that really liked using a TENS unit in their glute because with their stenosis, it referred pain into their glute. And a big thing for them was that they were always trying to lie down and apply the TENS units. Well, we just talked about being in a seated position, put the TENS units down on, and then sit while you're having that done. And they had so much more relief because they're in a flexion position. So this just reiterates that we're gonna be using flexion as your friend throughout a lot of this, and those pain relieving techniques are very, very beneficial, but how you do it matters. I had another patient that loved getting massages, but every time they went to the massage therapist, they would feel worse. It'd feel great in their back, but they would feel worse with the pain down their leg. That's because they spent most of the session laying on their belly. Don't let that be you. That's an extension moment. And while massages do feel good, if you're laying on your belly and extending for 30 minutes to an hour, you're gonna feel worse. I don't care who you are and how much stenosis you have, you're gonna feel worse. So just work with your massage therapist to either put pillows underneath your abdomen or lay on your side and do the exact same thing. And so those are some individual scenarios that I've seen, but we're using pain relieving techniques throughout this whole recovery to not only make you feel better in that moment, but help you find those one or two things that are going to help you in the future. Okay, so now let's get to it. So we went over the S, we went over the P, now let's go over activating the nerve glides. This is great for people with stenosis because they most likely have been told that they have sciatica or some variation of it, or neurogenic claudication. And what basically both of those things are is that when you stand and walk, you start to have pain down the leg. Now it's not always down the leg, it could be into the glutes or the lower back, it starts going out to the side, the hamstring, the calf, the foot. Either of those or any of those areas are applicable in this situation. So when we activate the nerve, we're spending time on that in a flexion position because you're having nerve issues. Most people don't end up having surgery from stenosis because they're not having nerve pain. It's because they are having nerve pain and they need to protect their nerves. And so we're improving the health of their nerves throughout activating the nerves, and this is how you do it. So I do recommend you do this. I have patients hold on to a sturdy countertop. They prop a foot up on a foot or a bench. They stand tall and they have symptoms. They're like, I don't want to stretch here because it hurts. Well, that's because you need to go into flexion. So what I have you do is you're going to round out a little bit, and then that may relieve some pressure on your back. You may feel a little bit more pull in your hamstring, and that nerve health we're talking about is just pulling that foot up and pointing it down, pulling that foot up and pointing it down. And what that's doing is it's tensioning the sciatic nerve, the most common nerve involved with stenosis. You're in a flexion position, so it's relieving the pressure off the nerve, and now you're gliding it to help improve its health, the ability to move and tolerate movement. And that movement, being tolerant to movement, is what happens when you try to walk. And so we want to improve our walking ability and standing ability, and we do that through activating the nerve. And so you're going to point down and pull up 20 times on the side that you have the most symptoms, or the side that you are having the most referral to. So if it's mostly your right side of your back, you're going to do it on your right side, but there's nothing wrong with doing it on both. So you're going to be in a rounded position, you're going to point down and pull up, point down and pull up. Now when you point down, it should feel relatively okay, good stretch. When you pull up, everybody's definition of okay is a little bit different. As from a physical therapist, it's okay that it's a little bit uncomfortable, but you may have to work into it and start to tolerate it more. So you may not be able to do 20 reps at first, and that's okay. You could, like I said, you could do both legs, round it out, point down and pull up. Woo! Man, let's just say it hurts so good, right? And so you're gonna point down and pull up, losing my balance here, point down and pull up, and you're gonna do that 20 times. 1 or 2 sets, it's your choice. And what's great about that nerve activation technique is that you can do it before you walk, during the walk, after the walk. You could do it right when you wake up in the morning. Moral of the story is it's not a strengthening exercise, so you can do it a lot, if you need to. And over time, you start to bend over more, and then pull down and point up. If you're still watching, which I hope you are, leave a comment underneath the video and let me know how the nerve glides feel for you. Some people with stenosis are a little bit uncomfortable at first, but then it improves, and some people feel really good with it. I don't know, everybody's body's different, everybody's nerves are different, but I would love to hear. So we went over the strengthening, pain relief, activating the nerves, SPAR. Now we're going to be working on mobility. And this is important because people with stenosis tend to end up in this position over time, which we don't want to be there. But that postural positioning is you, without knowing it, being in a flexion position to reduce the pressure of your spine and nerves. But we want to work into that mobility now to relieve your pain, but we need to at least maintain what you already have, if not gain more. And so I'm going to show you how you use flexion to help regain the normal mobility of your spine. Now it's time to go over the R, the regaining mobility. Now, I love doing standing exercises with my folks who have spinal stenosis because it's just convenient. You're having difficulty or pain standing, and we can get immediate relief with some standing stretches. But before we get to the stretch, we need to learn a principle of an anterior tilt or posterior tilt. So the posterior tilt moves us into flexion, which reduces strain. The anterior tilt moves us into extension, which increases strain. And so when you try to have really tall posture and poke your butt out, you're actually closing down on your spine. Where most people with stenosis or long time back pain, they typically have a knee bend posture with kind of a flat back, and that's because you're flexing and reducing pressure. But we can take a simple stretch such as the L stretch, a bending over stretch that a lot of people do, and get so much more out of it by using a flexion principle, the posterior tilt, and then going into the stretch. And when I do this, I feel immediate relief in like an elongation feeling in my lower back. Oh, when I do this. Ugh. Now, it does feel really good. So feel free to do it for 1 second, 3 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and then kind of shimmy back and forth till you feel a really good stretch. Now, when I work with my clients and over the 8-week program, we do work into some extension eventually, but how we do it really is different than what we're doing now. So we're going to be working into that flexion first and then kind of sitting into it and getting that relief. Now, I've had patients who try to get more out of it by poking their butt out more, and that puts them into extension. So they're like, why did that hurt more than it needed to or traditionally does? Well, it's because you're trying to extend. So at first, and most people really enjoy just doing that posterior tilt and getting more out of it instead of working on poking your butt out more and getting deeper into it. You don't have to work harder, you just have to work smarter, like most things in life. But especially with stenosis, you have to get really smart about your body and the predictability of it, especially if you want to avoid the invasive or scary treatments down the road. So we utilize flexion throughout regaining mobility because it's going to help you not only get more out of it, but be more successful. And so we've went over the S, P, A, and R, right? We have one part left, which is the keep moving or keep walking component of spinal stenosis recovery. Walking's a doozy. This is the one that when it really starts to get bad and you have a difficulty standing and walking, that's when you really start to seek help. And those are typically the people that I see. They're like, I used to be able to walk 5 minutes, but now I'm down to 1 minute. Well, that's very normal for spinal stenosis. In fact, it's actually one of the tests that we use, and that if you find yourself using the grocery cart more and more when you're at the grocery store, you definitely can benefit from using flexion throughout your walking. So you can do that a few different ways. And I go over this more in my book and my other walking program that I've developed, which I'll put in the description. But you're going to want to take flexion breaks as you walk. So you can flex before, do those nerve glides that we were talking about earlier, do the standing stretch, and that will open things up and get you warmed up to make you more successful. But throughout walking, you may notice that you start to develop back pain, glute pain, and the way that you utilize flexion is that you could simply bend over, prop your hands on your knees, or sit down for a moment. You may find yourself already doing those things, but it's good to understand that that's healthy and normal to do. Now, when you're a part of a walking program, either you develop or I develop or whatever you're trying to do, we utilize flexion not only to feel good in that moment, but we utilize it in a crafty way to give you relief then, but also make you and allow you to challenge your body enough to make a difference in the future. So we never want peripheralization or pain down the leg, but we also want to live with a little bit of pain so your body can tolerate that movement. So the long story short is that walking is complicated, and typically it requires a structured program to improve your distance that you can walk, or the intensity of your pain, or how fast you can walk. All of those things can improve, but it's important to utilize flexion throughout all of those, or every time that you walk, to help give you relief in that moment, because you don't want to irritate your back or nerves, but flexion is your way out of that. So I would challenge you to utilize flexion as much as you need to. It's not a sign of you giving up, it's just a sign of you using your body and its normal and natural tendencies when you have stenosis to help give you relief. Now, if you're part of the walking program, then we're going to structure it in a little bit of a different way that you can be successful still, but also challenge your body enough to heal and get better. So walking is the last component that you utilize flexion, so feel free to sit down or stretch as much as you need to, because it's not a sign of you giving up, it's just a sign of you listening to your body.